My name is Laura Simmons. I am 35 years old, and for 4 years, I believed I was unlucky. That is the simplest way to describe it. Things kept going wrong. Not dramatically, not the kind of catastrophic wrong that announces itself. The quiet kind. The kind that arrives in small packages and is easily explained away and leaves you feeling, after each one, slightly more uncertain than you were before. Slightly more convinced that there is something about you that invites misfortune. That bad luck is not something that happens to you, but something you generate, somehow, from the inside. I believed that for 4 years. And then an envelope arrived. No name on the front. No return address. Just my name and my home address in Portland, Oregon, printed in a standard font on a standard envelope, the kind that could have come from any printer in any office anywhere. Inside was a single page. Dates down the left margin. Names in the center. Amounts or descriptions on the right. A clean, organized list, formatted like a ledger, going back for years. Every wrong thing that had happened to me, listed, in order. My hands started shaking before I reached the middle of the page, because I was recognizing things I had never told anyone. Private losses, quiet setbacks, the small erosions that I had absorbed alone, and attributed to my own bad luck. They were here, documented, in sequence, not coincidences, not mistakes. Steps. Planned steps, in a deliberate sequence, by someone who had known exactly what they were doing and exactly how each one would land. And at the bottom of the page was a name. I knew the name. My whole body went cold. This was never a coincidence. Not one single moment of it. But before I tell you what actually happened, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Now, let's begin. I need to take you back 4 years to show you what the list was documenting, because none of it made sense until the list existed, and then all of it made sense at once. I was 31 years old in the year things started going wrong. I was working as a brand manager at a consumer goods company in Portland, a good position one I had worked toward for 8 years, doing work I was genuinely skilled at. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in the Pearl District that I had rented for 3 years, and that felt, finally, like a place that had become home rather than just somewhere I kept my things. I had savings. Not substantial, the specific modest savings of a person in their early 30s who has been careful and patient, but has not yet reached the point where careful and patient produces visible results. Enough to feel stable. Enough to feel like the foundation of something. And then, over 4 years, the foundation developed cracks that I attributed, one by one, to ordinary misfortune. The first thing was my apartment. My lease came up for renewal and my landlord informed me that the building had received a complaint, a formal one, filed with the city's housing authority, about noise from my unit. I had received no prior warning. The complaint, as described by my landlord, characterized me as a habitual disruptive tenant. This was not my experience of myself. I was, if anything, an unusually quiet neighbor. But the complaint was on record, and the landlord declined to renew my lease, and I moved. I found another apartment. It was smaller and more expensive, and the location was less convenient. I attributed this to the housing market. Bad timing. I moved on. 6 months later, a job application. I had applied for a senior brand director position at a company I respected, a step up from my current role that I had been working toward and that I was, by any objective measure, qualified for. I made it to the final round. Then I did not receive the offer. When I quietly inquired through a mutual contact, I was told that my references had been mixed. That one reference in particular had expressed reservations about my performance and my interpersonal style. I had submitted 3 references. 2 of them I had spoken to directly before listing them. Both had been enthusiastic and supportive. The third was a former manager named Christine Paulson, who I had worked with 6 years earlier, briefly and without incident, and who I had listed because she was senior in the industry and had always been pleasant when we crossed paths at events. I called Christine. She seemed surprised by my call and stated, carefully, that she had given a positive reference. What had been communicated to the company from her name did not match what she had said. I could not prove anything. There was no recording. There was no document. There was only my confusion and the job I had not received and the specific feeling of something not adding up, I attributed it to miscommunication. I moved on. The third thing was financial. A credit check I ran for a new apartment application showed a delinquency on my record that I did not recognize. A small account in collections, opened in my name at an address I had never lived at, with a balance that had been allowed to lapse. Identity theft, my bank suggested. A cleanup process was initiated. It took 8 months to fully resolve and affected my credit score during a period when I was also trying to refinance a small loan. Identity theft happens. Bad luck. I moved on. The fourth thing, the fifth, the sixth. I will not list them all because there were 11 of them over 4 years, and listing them in sequence would take longer than I want to spend on the version of this story that occurred before the envelope. What I will tell you is that they continued in the same register, private, specific, each one individually explicable, and each one eroding something. The apartment, the career opportunity, the financial stability, the professional reputation, in small quiet ways that I could sense but not point to. The sense of solid ground slowly replaced by the sense of ground that had become unreliable. I told myself I was unlucky. I told myself some people had these periods. I told myself that the accumulation was random and would end. And then the envelope arrived. I found it in my mailbox on a Tuesday evening in October. I almost missed it. It was between 2 pieces of ordinary mail and was itself ordinary looking enough that I carried it inside without registering it specifically. It was only when I set everything on the kitchen counter and sorted through it that I noticed the absence of a return address and picked it up more carefully. I opened it at the kitchen counter. I read the single page once, then again. Then I set it down and stepped back from the counter the way you step back from something when proximity is not helping you understand it. The page was a record, a factual, formatted, dated record of 11 incidents spanning 4 years. The noise complaint against my apartment. The reference that had not matched what Christine said she gave. The credit account opened in my name. 8 more, some of which I had known about and attributed to bad luck, some of which I had not fully known about until I saw them named on the list. Events that had happened at a remove from my direct experience, things that had shaped my world without being directly visible to me. Each entry had a date, a description, and a name or account number or a reference that would allow the entry to be verified. The list was 4 years of my life organized as evidence. At the bottom of the page, below the last entry, was a single line. A name. One name. No explanation. No accusation beyond the list itself. Just the name of the person who, the structure of the list implied, had constructed and executed all 11 of those incidents over 4 years. The name was Michelle Greer. I sat down on my kitchen floor because standing did not feel like the right relationship to what I had just read. I sat on the floor, and I held the page, and I said the name out loud, alone in my kitchen, as if saying it would help me understand how it connected to what I was holding. Michelle Greer and I had worked together 8 years ago at a marketing firm in Seattle that I had left after 2 years to take a better position in Portland. We had not been close. We had been colleagues, adjacent in the org chart, occasionally collaborative on projects, professionally pleasant in the way of people who share a workplace without sharing a friendship. I had not thought of her in years. I pulled out my phone and searched her name alongside the company where I had worked, then alongside Portland, then alongside several other search terms that occurred to me as I sat on my kitchen floor trying to understand what she would have had against me that would justify 4 years and 11 incidents. I found her professional profile. She had moved to Portland 18 months after I did. She was in the same industry, brand management, consumer goods. Her career trajectory, as visible from the outside, had been solid but not exceptional. I sat on my kitchen floor, and I thought. And then something surfaced from my memory that I had not thought about in 8 years. 8 years ago, at the Seattle firm, there had been a senior manager position that had opened. 2 candidates had been seriously considered. I had been one of them. I had received the position. The other candidate had been Michelle Greer. I had not thought of this in years because I had moved to Portland shortly after, and the Seattle chapter had receded. I had not considered, at the time or since, that the outcome of that competition had landed in Michelle in a way that had not receded. 4 years of documented incidents. Starting shortly after I had established myself in Portland. Starting, I realized now, approximately when Michelle had moved to the same city. I called a lawyer the following morning, a woman named Andrea Walsh who specialized in civil litigation and who had been recommended by a colleague. I brought the envelope and the page. Andrea read it with the careful attention of someone whose profession requires reading documents closely. When she finished, she set it on the desk between us and looked at me. "Do you know who sent this?" she asked. "No," I said. "Do you have any reason to believe the list is accurate?" I told her about Christine, about the credit account, about the apartment complaint, about the job I had not received. Andrea asked me to give her 2 weeks to begin preliminary verification of the list's entries before we discussed next steps. I gave her 2 weeks. The verification process took longer than 2 weeks. I will not walk you through every step of it because some of it is part of ongoing legal proceedings that restrict what I can say publicly. What I can tell you is that the entries on the list were verifiable. Not all of them immediately, and not all of them with equal clarity, but enough, and in enough detail, to establish a pattern that had a coherent shape when you could see the full 4 years at once. The noise complaint against my apartment had been filed through an online portal and traced, with some effort, to a device registered in Michelle's name. The credit account opened in my name connected to an address that, when investigated, connected to a network of similar accounts opened through the same method, a form of identity manipulation that had been used before by the same process. The reference situation was harder to document, but not impossible. There was a voicemail, retrieved from Christine's records at my attorney's request, that showed a call had been made to the hiring company from a number that was not Christine's. I am not going to detail every finding. The full account belongs in the legal proceedings where it is currently living. What I will tell you is what Andrea told me when she had enough to assess the full shape of it. She said, "This is not a person who acted impulsively. This is a person who planned this over a period of years with significant patience and with a specific understanding of how each action would affect your professional and personal stability without being directly traceable to any one actor. This is deliberate and sustained, and it was designed to be invisible." She paused. "It was nearly invisible," she said, "until someone decided it shouldn't be. I do not know who sent the envelope. I have thought about this at length, and I have theories, and I have discussed them with Andrea, but I do not know. Someone who knew. Someone with access to the documentation. Someone who had watched for 4 years and decided, at some point on a Tuesday in October, that I should know. I have stopped trying to identify them. Whatever their reasons, whatever their access, they handed me the thing that made the invisible visible. I am grateful. I have said that into the air a few times, to no one, in case saying it out loud is the only form of thanks available to me. The legal process is ongoing. I will not characterize its direction because doing so would be premature and because my attorney has been clear about what is appropriate to say publicly at this stage. What I can tell you is what I know now that I did not know for 4 years. I was not unlucky. I was not generating misfortune from some internal quality I needed to examine and correct. I was not the kind of person that bad things happened to because of something fundamentally wrong with how I moved through the world. I was the target of a deliberate, sustained, and carefully constructed campaign by someone who had, 8 years ago, lost a job competition and had never let it go. That is the truth of the 4 years. Not bad luck, not coincidence. Steps. I think about the 4 years differently now. The smaller self I had been becoming, incrementally, as each incident landed and was absorbed and attributed to my own misfortune. The self-doubt that had accumulated the way water accumulates in a low place, gradually without drama, until you are standing in it. That smaller self was the intended result. Someone had been engineering it, patiently and carefully, for 4 years. I did not become that smaller self permanently. The envelope arrived first. And what I learned from the envelope is this. When things keep going wrong in a pattern, the pattern is worth examining. Not with paranoia, with the clear and systematic attention of someone who takes their own experience seriously enough to look at it directly. I had dismissed my own experience for 4 years. I had called it bad luck because bad luck was less frightening than the alternative. The alternative, it turned out, was manageable. It was documentable. It was the kind of thing that, once named, could be addressed by the kind of people who address such things. Bad luck cannot be addressed. It can only be endured. The truth is harder than bad luck, and better, and worth finding, no matter how long it takes to arrive. Sometimes it arrives in a plain envelope on a Tuesday evening in October. You just have to open it,